Unabashed.
The most unpredictable.
Becomes a headline.
The most volatile.
Outrageous behavior.
Unsubstantiated narratives. A battle of personalities.
Welcome to Grand Tamasha, a co-production of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace and the Hindustan Times. I'm your host, Milan Vaishnav. Last fall, India's parliament passed 3 farm reform bills that the government claimed would radically change the way in which agriculture was practiced in the country. Yet just over 12 months later, the government announced its intention to repeal those laws, a major concession to large-scale, dogged protests launched by farmers in northern India. The repeal of the farm reform laws, hailed by many observers as a short-term victory for struggling farmers, has also raised complex questions about the future of agriculture in a rapidly urbanizing India. For 3 decades, the journalist Harish Damodaran has been chronicling developments in rural India. He's a senior fellow at the Center for Policy Research in Delhi, where he's enjoying a sabbatical from his day job as National Rural Affairs and Agriculture Editor at the Indian Express. Harish joins me on Zoom from New Delhi. Harish, good to speak with you.
Hi, Milan.
So before we get into the nuts and bolts of the farm laws and their repeal, I just wanted to ask you a question about you, really. You have been covering rural affairs, agriculture, farmers for many decades now. Most reporters that I meet and that I know are jockeying to write about big metros, high politics, foreign affairs. You've taken a very different route. Why so?
My grandfather, that's my father's father, was a farmer. Okay, so my early growing years were, I used to go very frequently to my village. It was in Kerala. It's a place called Vadakanjeri, which is near Thrissur. So I had some kind of interest in farming, basically interacting with my grandfather, the whole thing. Then, of course, afterwards I did economics, I just did a BA. And then I joined journalism, So I started doing economic reporting, sort of macroeconomic kind of a thing. But then I realized that, if you want to do serious economics, you should have some kind of a specialization, And then I joined Business Line, Hindu Business Line. And we had a very strong agriculture reporting kind of a team. It was more sort of agribusiness kind of a desk. So I said that, come on, I want to do this, So and it just flowed, So I think now I've been at this now since maybe around, say, 1994 onwards. Yeah, 1994 onwards, almost 3 decades. Yeah, so I would say the main reason was the Hindu Business Line, because we had a very strong agribusiness reportage, Whether we like it or not, agriculture is the real industry in India. If you, in terms of both the number of people employed and also as a share of GDP, we only look at, when we say 17-18%, we only look at the direct share of agriculture. We don't like you look at cotton, but you don't look at textiles. You look at sugarcane, but you won't look at sugar, colas, then even alcohol, right? Most of it comes from molasses. So my guess is if you look at the forward and backward linkages, definitely I think agriculture would be contributing at least a third to India's GDP. So it's always nice to know one subject in detail, even as an economic reporter. You could be into banking, you could be into many other things, but I think that's what has generated my interest in agriculture. And I don't think there was any plan or anything, and now I'm stuck in it, so it's nice. Yeah.
Well, stuck in it is one way to put it, but this is now literally front page news. From an outside perspective, I think there are several stereotypes that we often have in the back of our minds when we think about agriculture. And I was talking with the anthropologist Mukulika Banerjee about this because this is the subject of her recent book, as I'm sure you know, where we have these themes in our head. Agriculture is in a state of perennial crisis. Farming in India is not very productive. Farmers are unhappy with the wages they receive. They're heavily indebted. They seek various kinds of reassurance from the state. These are the kind of common narratives that one hears about. Before we get into the laws themselves, how well does that series of stereotypes actually capture the reality of India's agrarian sector as we know it?
I've been saying this now for quite some time. The real crisis of Indian agriculture is not of the marginal and the small farmer. It's actually the crisis is actually of the middle peasant. I mean, whom I call as a full-time farmer. Typically say starting with say about 2.5 acres, and going to say 10 acres, 15 acres, So I think this is what the crisis which we are seeing is basically of this middle peasant, and this particular middle peasant saw. I would say some decades of prosperity, maybe after the Green Revolution, and generally the terms of trade were quite favorable to agriculture, I would say, even in the 90s and definitely in the first decade of the current century. So I would say that the crisis is really of this this middle class, the rural middle class. That is the crisis, and which is why you are seeing all this restiveness, and this has been happening for quite some time, and I would say that is the real crisis, if you see during the first initial decades of the Green Revolution, you had the spread of irrigation. Right, you had the new varieties, right? I mean, high-yielding varieties. So access to irrigation, access to new seeds, and some kind of a state support, both in terms of agriculture R&D and also minimum support price, procurement, some kind of an assured price, and the fact that we were more or less deficit in most crops. So prices were not an issue. So I think the government's focus was more trying to control inflation. So there was always a shortage. If you look at it throughout. And then I think we started moving into surpluses gradually. It started off maybe I think in the 90s with wheat and rice. Okay, I think maybe in the early 2000s sugar. Okay, so when you have sugar, when you have wheat, and when you have rice, it's basically calories, right? We became calorie surplus, you can say, calorie carbohydrate kind of a thing. Then the second stage came when actually our incomes were rising, overall incomes were rising. So there was a huge demand suddenly among the poor, for protein rich foods, for fruits and vegetables. So basically minerals, proteins. Fats, so which is how you saw a lot of demand, the demand changing, more towards say poultry, eggs, chicken, these kind of things. So what I'll say is that today we have reached a situation where there seems to be surpluses across across all commodities, including even pulses, even milk, So I think that's what the real crisis today is, and that in turn I think has basically hit the real farmer, the whole-time farmer, and this full-time farmer would be maybe about 40 million, not the 150 and 100 million numbers which we hear. Because these are farmers who are full-time farmers, they derive bulk of their household income from doing farming, So that is the real crisis. So the crisis is not of the landless laborer and all. Those are there, but that's not an agrarian crisis. So when we say agrarian crisis, it should refer to this once prosperous, middle class. That's what I believe is a real crisis.
So if you rewind the clock a year or so to September 2020, you had Parliament passing these 3 agrarian reform bills that, in its own words, the ruling party, the government said, would transform the way that agriculture was practiced, right? Now, since that time, there have been sort of 2 parallel debates on the bills, right? So one is focused on the substance, is it good, is it bad? The other has focused on the process by which they were passed. So if we just stick with the substance for a moment, if you had to summarize for just a kind of lay audience, which has not been steeped into India's agriculture sector, what would you say were the principal aims of that legislation?
I think the principal aim of the legislation was to take to make farmers more sort of produce for the market, based on demand and supply kind of a thing. So basically making it a demand driven kind of an agriculture, and try and bringing in more and more private players. See, there is a problem today. If you look at, say, the average consumption, of a family, of any family, say it comes to about, say, 30 kilos of rice or wheat. Okay, so 30 kilos into 12. So, and you work it out, there are 30 crores, there are 300 million families in India. So overall, when you look at it, our total requirement, our total cereal requirement today directly for consumption may not be more than, say, 150 million tons. Okay, but we are producing every year around, say, 250 million tons. Right. So we have come into this kind of a surplus situation in this. So I think the main thing which the government wanted to do was to, drive farmers away from producing rice and wheat and, move into produce more for the market rather than produce for the government. Okay, I think that's what they were trying to address. So I would say principally there was nothing wrong in that particular approach. Like out of the three farm bills, I would say that the one act which I was very much in favor was removing the stocking limits, Essential Commodities Act, which I think was basically a law from the or maybe from the Bengal famine years, when India was sort of deficit, everything. So as I said in the beginning, we have moved to some kind of a surplus situation, and you were dealing with this whole thing, the moment the prices of, say, onions rise, immediately you ban export. And actually the present government has done it even after the enactment of the farm laws, in the case of pulses and in the case of edible oils, etc. So I would say that removing stock limits was definitely, it was needed. Okay, so you need definitely to bring in private players and those kind of things. I think in the other two acts, I think the communication is what I think communication was what really went wrong. Everybody knows that Punjab and Haryana, etc., have to diversify. They have to move away from just cultivating rice and wheat. They need to move to other crops. But I think how the farmers interpreted it is that the government will stop procurement. Okay, government is going to exit, and we should remember that this agriculture reforms has been sort of it has been almost the end. So the farmers have seen what has happened to telecom. They have seen what has happened to schools, in the schools, educational institutions, hospitals, etc., right, where the government has been retreating. So I think these farmers had a sixth sense that the real objective of the government is to withdraw from support. And obviously the farmers who were affected the most, they were the ones who would have protested, right? And we are talking of these farmers who are fairly advanced, and they have seen some kind of a prosperity, and they represent some kind of a rural middle class. So I think that's been the background.
So let me just pause on this point for a second, because there have been some commentators who have said, look, at the end of the day, these protests which emerged, they were driven by a relatively small number of farmers who were geographically concentrated in Haryana, Punjab, and maybe Western Uttar Pradesh. They feared the opening up of the sector, what that would do to their livelihoods. Others have said, no, actually, this was a broad-based movement, that there were farmers all around the country who were up in arms, who were making noise about these bills. What do we know about who was actually protesting, and how much of it was they really feared for their livelihoods because of what was in the bills, or perhaps perceptions or false perceptions about what was in the legislation and what was not?
See, all peasant movements in the past, they've always been from any particular region, and probably even from one section of the peasantry. You look at, for example, the Kheda Satyagraha or the Bardoli Satyagraha of Sardar Patel, right? uh, these were basically from Gujarat, right? That to mainland Gujarat, basically Kheda and Surat, that belt, and these were largely led by the patidars. Okay, and these again were not poor peasants; these were again middle peasants. So I would say that this present farm movement has again been largely a movement of the Jat peasantry. Okay, and I would say that this is the first time where Jats from Punjab, from Haryana, and from Western UP, and also parts of Rajasthan, they all came together. So this was a movement of the Jat peasantry, just like Kheda and Bardoli were movements of the Patidar peasantry, right? And these were basically middle peasants. These are neither rich nor poor. Okay, and as I said, these farmers have seen prosperity. Okay, these are all farmers who have access to irrigation, but these are not the kind of whatever which we read in books. 100 acres, 200 acres. These are not landlords. These are proper farmers. And probably they would start, I would say about 2 acres, 3 acres, and then going up to say about 15 acres. So definitely it's not a national movement. No, it cannot be. No farmer movement is a national movement. Okay, whether it is of Marathas or anything. This is not a movement of landless laborers or very poor peasantry or something. No, this is very specific. This is confined to a region. Okay, which is basically your Green Revolution belt. Okay, this is a movement of the middle peasantry, right, and largely of the Jat peasantry.
So I just want to pick up on something you said, which is the way in which kind of identity politics kind of intersects with the farmer protests, right? Because for someone who sits in the United States, I was shocked, in fact, to see the spread of news about this. Of course, we had celebrities like Rihanna and others tweeting about it, but even, on my own social media feeds, would see people sharing pictures of these large crowds of colorfully dressed farmers, at the gates of Delhi. And these are people who aren't Indian. They're not of the diaspora. They don't think about India. So it somehow connected in this larger way in our current social media ecosystem. Do you have a sense of why this sort of took off? Was it because of the size of the protests? Was it because of the feeling that democracy is on the ropes in India? What is it that allowed this to take off even beyond just the Jat or Sikh diaspora?
Something. I mean, many people who have been supporting this movement, many of these people would have 10 years ago, 20 years ago, called all these people kulaks, big farmers, irrigation, rich farmers, those kind of things. And it's ironical that this same language is now being used by those who are close to this regime, that these are all big farmers, all kulaks, etc. Okay, I think we don't understand the so-called kulak, and there is a problem in policy making. The policies are designed either for the very rich, so you give incentives to industries, etc., or to the very poor, so you have many yojanas for the very poor, but there's nothing for this middle, and this middle, especially, in rural India, so we take for granted that the farmer is someone who's not at all sophisticated. He'll be wearing a turban. Basically, it has to do with the kind of Hindi films which we have learned, right? I mean, which we have seen, right? He's a gamar. The guy is a rustic. So I think probably the fact that this whole thing happened in the Delhi borders, very close to the national capital. So automatically they could be heard. Maybe if this movement had come up in Patna or in Calcutta or in Guwahati, you would not have got that kind of visibility. So definitely the NRIs helped. The NRIs helped. And then the fact that this is in the gates of Delhi, and these are not poor farmers, right? I mean, so they know how to mobilize. Yeah. So all my friends, from the left, who used to call these people kulaks, and actually the one institution which played a big role in these protests were the cops. Again, the cops are the people, the kind of things we detest, right? But it was precisely the cops.
And by cops, you mean the cop panchayats.
The cop panchayats, right. So these were again seen as, very backward kind of a thing. I remember when I came to Delhi first, the Jats were a joke. People used to say, hey, these guys are, very rustic kind of a thing. So I think in that way, I think we've had many such movements. I think in the last maybe 10 years, you had the Marathas in Maharashtra, right? You had the Maratha reservation movement. Okay, you had the Patidar reservation movement. You had the Kapu reservation movement. So I think basically this is a crisis of the middle peasant. The middle peasant who is not able to continue in farming. Because the costs have gone up. The prices are not increasing. The demand for farm produce is not growing, and at the same time, the opportunities outside of agriculture aren't rising. So I think that's how this crisis should be. Whereas we think that if it's a crisis, that means people will be starving. No, these guys are not going to starve. Okay, these are not that kind of. These are not poor. So maybe we are not used to it. Whereas when you had the Anna movement was all mostly city slickers. Urban movement. We all related to it, but we are not able to relate to a movement where farmers wear jeans, right? I mean, they have they eat pizza, right? And they don't try to show that they are very poor and all. And you saw, right? I mean, those tractors, belting music, right? And lot of whatever. So these are not these are a very proud race, and you can't. I mean, anyone who has tried to mess around with them, they have they really. I mean. Right from Aurangzeb to General Dyer to, I mean, compared to that, Modi is nothing, right? Yeah.
Well, but it's still interesting, right? Because, 10 days ago, the Prime Minister, in a surprise televised nationwide address, announced that his government would be repealing all three laws in the new session of Parliament, something they actually did today as we're recording. And in a recent piece for the Indian Express, you noted that Modi's announcement on November 20th effectively amounts to burying and interring something that was already dead. Now, the conventional wisdom holds that, look, the government folded because it was looking ahead at critical assembly elections in Punjab and Uttar Pradesh. Is it so simple, or is there a deeper calculus going on?
I think the mistake the government did was to allow this movement to continue for very long. Okay, I think most of the calculations of the Modi government has been that this middle peasant doesn't matter, because because I think Modi has managed to get a lot of votes from the very poor. Right. Yeah. And all his programs, whether it is rural housing, whether it is electricity, Ujjwala, right, LPG,
sanitation, so on.
Yeah. They have targeted the very poor, right? And whereas so you are targeting the very poor and then also playing on some kind of a communal kind of a thing, So there have been two kind of things which have been happening. One is trying to invoke religion, right? I mean, Hindutva, etc., and combining it with welfareism, whatever new welfareism and these kind of whatever public provisioning of private goods, right? I mean, so private utilities, right? So I think that was the tried and tested formula which won them the election in 2019. So I think initially they dismissed off this movement, and ironically they used a lot of leftist jargon, right? I mean, rich farmer, kulak, the MSP, whereas we should be helping the small, the marginal farmer, etc. But I think they underestimated this the community mobilization. The ability of the Jats to mobilize, and I think that has been one very big. It's given a lot of confidence to this movement, because it has united. This entire Jat peasantry, maybe I don't know, after Tikait, maybe late 80s, and I think the more it dragged on, the more I think that was a fatal mistake which the Modi government made. And I would say that one of the collateral casualties of this whole thing is that now MSP is now a universal demand now, and what was basically a regional and a particular community focused movement today, I think, has resonance. I think this demand for MSP, that it should be this legal right for MSP, is something I think every farmer in India will relate to. You ask any farmer, he or she will relate to. They may not relate to this to these three farm laws, because these farm laws may be relevant only to Punjab and Haryana. Okay, but now the UP farmer now says, hey man, we should get a minimum support price. So I think this has now it has now sort of permanently, it has been ingrained in the consciousness of farmers across India, and willy-nilly the Modi government has now made this it has actually made it a national movement, when it was not. And it has become national movement because they managed to also bring in this MSP into the picture. And I think maybe if these acts were repealed, maybe by January, February or something, this would not have come. And this is going to really mess up the situation. This it's not that Modi, by repealing, it is not that one step forward, two steps forward and one step backward. It's not that. Here it looks like it's three steps backward, right? I mean, you don't have. I mean, you have to repeal your farm laws, and plus now you have to deal with this elephant in the room called the MSP legal right. Whereas before that, it was not there.
Hey, Grant Tamasha listeners, thanks for listening to the podcast. Putting this show together each week is a labor of love, but it takes a lot of work to put out a great show every week. If you'd like to support the work we do at Grant Tamasha, please visit ceip.org/donate. Don't forget to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or on your favorite podcasting platform, so you'll be the first to know when a new episode rolls out. Let me ask you about this elephant in the room, because in a September piece with Express, you noted that, nowhere in these new laws is there a suggestion that the current system of minimum support price, or MSP, that MSP-based procurement of food grains is going to end, right? And that's basically where the government sets a floor price for crops, and then, it is the government agencies would procure that crop. Now, if this was not in the laws, and the government has time and time again vehemently denied its intention to go in this direction, how did this perception get created in the first place? Because now we're at a point where the farmers are saying, we're actually going to stay in the streets because, yes, repealing the laws was the first step. The second step is going to be writing into legislation a guaranteed minimum support price.
In Punjab, the APMC, that is the mandi, farmers have a lot of emotional connect with the APMC mandis. Okay, it's something like in Gujarat, there is a lot of emotional connect of the dairy farmer with Amul. The cooperative society where the farmer sells his her milk. There is a lot of emotional attachment. Okay, so the farmers in Punjab and Haryana, they said that, hey man, this is basically going to lead to our APMC, the mandis, getting shut. See, because if you allow private trade, that is, I can buy anywhere. So they said that, hey, this is going to lead to a situation where the mandis will become uneconomical. Okay, it's not going to. The mandis will shut down. Something like how BSNL shut down, right? So the farmers started seeing a game there, and plus, see, a lot of it they got even from the Bihari laborers who are working in Punjab farms. Okay, Bihar is a state which had APMCs. Okay, and when the APMCs were actually dismantled in Bihar, okay, and suddenly there was nothing, and it was a free trade kind of a thing, and no assurance, etc. Whereas here the farmers are saying, hey, there's nothing wrong in the mandis. The government is saying that these are all bad things, but we have no problem with the mandis. The government is saying we are giving you freedom. We don't want any freedom. It's like telling a poor person, I'm giving you the freedom. I'll shut down AIMS. I'll shut down the government schools. You can go to a convent. You can go to Fortis. You can go to Max. The thing. So many people don't want that freedom. So the Punjab farmers said, hey, we have no problem with this. So again they started saying, no. This mandis are all, you have the Aadhiyas, you have the commission agents. They're all exploitative. We want to free you from them.
Sort of these middlemen who are interfering.
Yeah. These are all cheating you and all. But these farmers said, hey, no, they're not cheating me. I'm selling through them. They are buying me. So I think the government tried to create these kind of, false villains, and saying that, the thing. So I think the farmers then as I said, they had already seen how BSNL had been run down. Many public institutions shutting down, it's not that they're formally shutting down or something, but basically and farmers in Punjab have had some experience with contract farming, etc., right from the early 90s, when Pepsi was there, and most of those were kind of failed ventures, So if you go and tell a farmer in Punjab that, hey, these APMCs are no good, we'll get Reliance, we'll get Adani to buy, we'll get big corporates. They'll say, no, we don't want these. We are okay with FCI. We have no problem, So I think that's what really kind of happened. And once the Punjab farmer got into this game, then the Haryana farmers joined in, and then I think this community feeling, that also came in, and then the NRIs joined in. When the NRIs joined in, I think Rihanna, etc., would have come in anyway. It was all just it was just taking it into a different this thing. And I think this is a kind of a mistake. The Modi government made, I think lack of I think lack of sense of history. In the case of the Patidars, also they made that mistake, but they immediately they did a lot of correctives. I think if you see the 2018 elections, BJP suffered heavy reverses in Gujarat, but after that there were a lot of correctives. In terms of procuring more groundnut, procuring more of cotton, etc. They moved into damage control very fast because they realized that, that you cannot mess around with the Patidar peasantry. But I think in the case of the Jats and the Sikhs, I think lack of understanding, it's a lack of understanding of history. I think, otherwise, why would they have brought in Khalistan and these kind of things? It was a combination of, I think, both arrogance and ignorance. So you don't play around with a kind of a proud race. These are not. One shouldn't use that kind of language, but it's a fact that these are people with a history. They have some kind of a martial tradition. And they and they have a feeling that we are farmers. We are not going to beg before anybody, and they didn't need any support from anyone. It was all completely, it was self-mobilization. It was completely. This was a movement which was entirely crowd-funded. Which is why it was able to last for more than a year.
So as I just bring this conversation to an end, Harish, let me ask you about the future, right? Because those who have supported these laws have said, okay, farmers have declared victory because the bills are repealed, but this victory is a Pyrrhic one, because in the long run, this is going to set back the quest for badly needed farm reforms. that the sector is in dire need of, and farmers themselves are the ones who are going to feel the pinch. As you look out to the future, do you agree with this assessment that this is going to be ultimately a short-term win, but a long-term defeat?
I would say that the MSP demand, it will have to be fulfilled in some form or the other. Okay, this idea that the farmer should have a minimum price, something, and this thing is, I think now it has percolated deep inside among all farmers. Okay, you cannot run away from this. Now, how do you do it? So maybe one way to do it is, rather than the government procuring, buying and stocking and all these things, which we know is not possible. So government allows the private trade to take place, you allow the market forces, but maybe you can pay some kind of a price difference, price deficiency, and which is the system you have in the US, you have even in China, right? You have a national price, right, for whether it is milk or any kind of a thing, and you have to pay farmers that kind of a difference. This is bound to happen. So I would say that the present regime, what we have, it combines the worst of everything. Because you have MSPs, but those MSPs are enforced only on, I think, maybe 4 crops. Basically wheat, rice, sugarcane, and cotton. Right. So you have a situation where the MSP is really implemented in these 4 crops, and farmers have assurance of price support there. So farmers automatically, they gravitate towards producing more of these 4. Okay. And definitely India doesn't need more sugar, more rice, and more wheat. We don't need more of calories and carbohydrates. Right. But the way the current system works is, I have very good implementation of MSP in 4 crops. But in all the other crops, there is no implementation. So why should the farmer produce, say, pulses? Why should the farmer produce oil seeds, right? Because if I don't know what price I'm going to get, so you need, I think we need to move into some kind of a price assurance, and it should cover definitely more number of crops. Okay, and probably the fiscally as well as environmentally sustainable way to do it is, you implement this minimum price for all crops. Okay, you not just for these 4, you do it for all crops. Okay, and the right way to do it is through paying the price difference. The difference between the government's minimum support price and what the market is paying. Like, there are many years you don't have to pay the price difference. Like, for example, today in mustard or in soybean, there's no need because the open market prices are way above the MSP. But there are years when your prices are low. So you need to give this kind of a support. And without that, it will be very difficult, even in the long run. So we need to move to that kind of a system. And today, with technology, it's possible. Right, we know who are the farmers. All farmers have bank accounts. Right. You are already doing like, you have the PM Kisan, right? I mean, where you are paying about 120 million farmers. You
cash transfers directly into their
so
accounts.
Today you have. I know every farmer. I know what his or her land holding is. Okay, I know all, and today with your Enam, right? I know all the mandis. Okay, all the mandis are connected. I know what is the price. So the government need not do any purchases. It doesn't need to, physically buy and store, and we have seen what has happened with rice and wheat and all, it's impossible, to stock so much of these things. See, and this is very costly. See, the reason why it is costly is not just because you are buying wheat and paddy at 20 rupees or whatever, per kg, but because you are also selling at 1 rupee, 2 rupees, right? And a lot of grain has been given out free. So it's not, so the farmers never said that you give out this grain free for 1 rupee or 2 rupees. The farmer just said, hey man, this is my cost of production, at least give me some return, so let me be entitled to this particular price. And I think we need to do it for all crops to the extent possible. And maybe in the long run, it should be more towards some kind of a per acre kind of a transfer. Maybe instead of a minimum support price, you can have a minimum income support instead of a minimum price support. If farmers are assured of a minimum income, right, so that they remain in business, and I think that's in the long run, that's a solution, and willy-nilly, as I said, I think MSP legalization was 1 year ago, it was not on the drawing board. But today, no government can run away from it, and you will have to. You will say, "I'll appoint a committee and all." No, but you will have to come to this. This is bound to happen. This is going to create some kind of this thing. And maybe if you had repealed the farm laws earlier, maybe this demand would not have come. But now this is something. It's like you have whetted the appetite of not just the Punjab farmer, but farmers across India.
My guest on the show this week is Harish Damodaran. He is a senior fellow at the Center for Policy Research in New Delhi and a journalist with nearly 30 years' experience as a field reporter and an editorial analyst. He is also the author of a terrific book, India's New Capitalists, Caste, Business, and Industry in a Modern Nation, that looks at the evolution, really, of India's capitalist class since independence. Harish, this is a complicated and thorny set of subjects, but thank you for making sense for all of our listeners, and thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, Milan. Really nice speaking to you. Yeah, thank you.
Grant Tamasha is a co-production of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace and the Hindustan Times. This podcast is an HT Smartcast original and is available on htsmartcast.com, India's fastest growing podcasting platform. You can also find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to rate and review. Helps others find the show more easily. For more information about the show and to find the writing we reference on this week's episode, visit our website, granttamasha.com. Production assistance comes from Caroline Duckworth, Tim Martin is our audio engineer, and Cliff J. Pranada is our executive producer. Thanks for listening, and see you next week.
This was a Hindustan Times production brought to you by HT Smartcast.
HT Smartcast.